I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I just set my napkin on the table, pushed my chair back slowly, and walked out of my own daughter-in-law's graduation dinner while 40 people watched me leave. That was 8 months ago. My wife called me 31 times before midnight. I watched every single notification light up my phone from the parking lot of a Cracker Barrel 2 miles away, eating a piece of pie I didn't even want, just so I'd have somewhere to sit. I never answered. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. And the beginning, if I'm honest, started long before that dinner. My name isn't important. What matters is that I'm 63 years old, retired from 31 years with the County Water Authority, and I thought I knew my wife. We'll call her my wife because that's what she was for 38 years. 38 years. I was 25 when we got married in her mother's backyard in Knoxville. She wore a dress her aunt made. I cried when I saw her come around the corner of the house. I'm not ashamed of that. We had 2 sons. Raised them in the same house we bought in 1994 for $112,000. That house is worth close to $380,000 now. I kept it maintained. New roof in 2011, HVAC in 2018. I repainted the shutters every 5 years because my wife liked the color and I liked keeping things right. I was not a flashy man. I was not wealthy. I drove a used F-150 and I wore the same style of New Balance sneakers I'd been wearing since the mid-90s. But I worked every day. I never cheated. I never gambled. I never drank more than a beer or 2 on a Friday. I coached Little League for 11 years. I volunteered at the church food pantry every 3rd Saturday. I was not a perfect man, but I was a consistent one, and I believed that counted for something. My wife worked part-time at a dental office for most of our marriage. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed the people, enjoyed getting out of the house. I never had a problem with that. When she started staying a little later on Tuesdays, I figured they were doing billing or catch-up work. When she got a new phone and said hers was acting up, I figured she just wanted something newer. When she started going to a yoga class on Thursday evenings and then sometimes Friday mornings, I thought, good for her. She was happy. I liked that she was happy. I was not looking for anything wrong. That's what I have to keep telling myself. I was not naive. I was trusting. There is a difference. Naive is when you don't know what to look for. Trusting is when you've been given 38 years of reasons not to look. The first thing that bothered me, the real first thing I couldn't shake, was a weekend in March. Our younger son and his wife were coming down from Columbus for a visit. My wife knew this. We talked about it. I'd bought steaks and corn and a good bottle of wine she liked. Saturday morning she told me she needed to run an errand. She'd be back by noon. She came back at 4:15. The kids were already there. We'd eaten sandwiches because we didn't want to start the steaks without her. She walked in, barely apologized, said she'd lost track of time. My son looked at me, and I looked at my son, and neither of us said anything because that's what you do. You don't make a moment out of it. You move forward. But I noticed, over the next few weeks, I started noticing more. Small things, the kind of things you talk yourself out of because you don't want to be that man. The man who checks his wife's phone. The man who asks where she's been. I was not going to be that man, but I was also not going to be a fool. She started signing her texts with little symbols she'd never used before. She started caring more about how she looked when she left the house. Not in a way that was dramatic, in a way that was careful, deliberate. She was paying attention to herself again in a way she hadn't in a long time, and instead of feeling pleased for her the way a husband should, I felt uneasy, and I hated myself for feeling uneasy. I mentioned it to no one, not my sons, not my brother out in Flagstaff, not my buddy from the Water Authority I'd had lunch with every other Wednesday for 15 years. I kept it inside and I kept going to work in my garden and watching the evening news and acting like the man I'd always been. Then in April, I found a receipt. It fell out of the pocket of a jacket she'd asked me to hang up. Dinner for 2 at a steakhouse in a town 20 minutes away on a Tuesday night in February, a Tuesday when she'd told me she was working late. The total was $94. She'd paid in cash. My wife never paid in cash for anything. She used our joint Visa for everything because she liked the reward points. I held that receipt for a long time. I put it back in the jacket pocket. I hung up the jacket. Then I went and sat on the back porch for about an hour while the sun went down. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't confront her the next night either. I needed to know more before I knew what I was dealing with. I'm a methodical man by nature. That's what 31 years in water systems management does to you. You don't act before you understand the problem. I called a private investigator out of Chattanooga, whose name I found through an attorney I'd used years ago for a property dispute. He was not cheap. I paid him $2,800 for 3 weeks of work. It was the most I'd spent on anything that wasn't the house or a vehicle, and I felt sick about it, but I paid it. He gave me a folder 2 weeks later. I sat in his office parking lot for 45 minutes before I drove home. Then I went home and I put the folder in the filing cabinet in my workshop under a hanging folder marked Truck Records. And I went inside and watched the news like always. There was a man. He worked in property management. He was 57, divorced, and he lived in a condo about 12 miles from our house. They had been meeting, according to what the PI had documented, for at least 7 months. 7 months before I found the receipt. So closer to 9 months total by the time I was sitting in that parking lot. 9 months. I'd been sleeping beside her. I'd been making her coffee in the mornings. I'd fixed the leaky faucet in the master bath while she was presumably on her phone with him. I'd brought her soup when she had a cold in January. She had let me bring her soup. I want to be very honest about something. I did not cry right away. I was too quiet for crying. I was the kind of quiet that you get when something you always feared but never named finally becomes real. It's not dramatic. It's almost peaceful in a terrible way. Like the moment right before something breaks. I said nothing to her. I went about my life. I called my attorney, a woman I had used for the property thing before, and I told her I needed to understand my options. She was straightforward with me. Tennessee is a fault state, which meant what my wife had done mattered. She told me to keep documenting and not to change any accounts or make any large moves yet. I did what she said. For 6 weeks I lived in my own house like an actor in a play I'd written myself. I watched my wife put on her Thursday yoga clothes, and I knew she wasn't going to yoga. I watched her eyes light up when her phone buzzed, and I knew who it was. I kept the folder in my workshop. I kept my counsel. The dinner was in June. Our daughter-in-law, our older son's wife, had finished her master's degree in nursing. She'd worked for it for 3 years while raising 2 kids and working part-time. We were proud of her, all of us. My son had reserved a private room at an Italian restaurant in town. Good place. He'd been planning it for weeks. 12 people. His family, her family, my wife and me. We drove there together. My wife wore a blue dress. She smelled like perfume I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. She was cheerful in the car, talking about the kids and the restaurant and whether she'd have the salmon or the chicken piccata. I answered when she spoke. I kept my face easy. We got there, and the room was already filling up. My daughter-in-law's parents were there, her sister, her aunt and uncle. My son was at the door greeting people. I shook hands. I hugged my daughter-in-law. I told her I was proud of her, and I meant it. I was proud of her. That part had nothing to do with anything else. And then I saw him. He was standing near the end of the table, talking to my daughter-in-law's uncle. He had a glass of wine in his hand, and he was laughing at something. He was wearing a sport coat. He was relaxed. He looked like a man who belonged there. My wife's hand was on my arm. She was talking to someone. I heard nothing. I was looking at this man in a sport coat, standing inside a celebration I had driven to in good faith, standing next to a family I had loved for years, and I understood in one long, cold second that this had been arranged. She had invited him to this dinner, to my son's family's table. I did not move right away. I stood there for probably 90 seconds, and I felt my jaw set, and I took 2 slow breaths, and I made a decision. I walked to my son, and I said, quietly, close to his ear, "I need to step outside. I'll explain later. I love you." He looked at my face, and he nodded once, and he didn't ask. That's my son. He's always been able to read a room. Then I walked back through the restaurant, past the bar, past the hostess stand, out through the front door, and into the parking lot. I got in my truck. I sat there for a minute. Then I drove to the Cracker Barrel, and I ordered a slice of pecan pie and a coffee. And I sat in a booth by the window. My phone started going off at 7:14 in the evening. I watched it. 31 calls by 11 o'clock. A few texts in between. The first one said, "Where did you go?" The second said, "Please come back." The third said, "People are asking." The fourth said, "I can't explain." After that, I stopped reading them. I drove to my brother's house in Flagstaff 3 days later. I told him everything. He sat across from me at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and didn't say a word until I was finished. Then he said, "What do you need?" That was it. That's all he asked. I stayed for 2 weeks. My attorney handled the preliminary paperwork while I was gone. When I came back, I went straight to my workshop, and I left my wife's things where they were, and I slept in the guest room, and I went to see my attorney on a Tuesday morning with the folder from the PI and a clear head. My wife, for the first week, kept trying to talk to me. She stood in the hallway outside the guest room. She knocked twice the first night, 3 times the second. I did not open the door. On the third night, she slid a piece of paper under the door, handwritten. It said she was sorry, that she hadn't meant for it to go this far, that she still loved me, that she didn't want to lose 38 years. I read it. I folded it. I put it in the folder. She moved out in August. She stayed with her sister initially. I heard through my son, who I'd had a long, honest conversation with, the hardest conversation of my life, that she had told people we'd grown apart, that we'd had problems for years, that it was mutual. I will say this carefully, because I want to be fair, even now. There are 2 sides to every marriage, and I was not always easy to live with. I was private. I kept things inside. I worked a lot of overtime in the years before retirement. I was not always emotionally available in the ways she may have needed. I believe all of that. I carry it. But there is a difference between a hard marriage and a betrayal. There is a difference between growing apart and bringing a man to your son's family dinner while your husband of 38 years stands in the same room. Those are not the same category of thing. The divorce was finalized in October. Under Tennessee law, the court took the circumstances into account. I kept the house. I kept the retirement accounts I had built. We divided what was fair and no more. My attorney was worth every dollar I paid her. My daughter-in-law, for her part, called me the morning after the dinner. She was mortified. She had not known who that man was. She had assumed he was a friend of her own aunt's. She cried on the phone, and I told her it was not her day to carry this, that I was proud of her, that none of it had anything to do with her degree or her hard work or who she was. I meant every word of that too. My son and I have had several conversations since. They have not all been easy. He loved his mother. He still does. That's not a problem I need to solve. He's a grown man with his own family, and his relationship with her is his to navigate. What I needed him to know was that I was not going to disappear from his life, that I was not angry at him, and that I intended to be present for my grandchildren the same way I always had been. I showed up for their ball games in November. I'll be there for Christmas morning. Nothing changes on my end. I have lived alone in this house for 4 months now. I repainted the front door in September because I'd been meaning to for 2 years, and I finally had a Saturday free. I bought myself a decent gas grill I'd always wanted but never justified. I joined a woodworking group that meets on Tuesday evenings at the County Recenter, and there are 8 men in that group, most of them my age, and I look forward to it every week. I am not going to tell you I am fine every day. I am not going to tell you I am fine every day. I am not. There are mornings I wake up at 5 and the house is quiet in a way it wasn't before, and the quiet has a weight to it that I haven't fully figured out yet. There are evenings when I cook a meal for one and I feel something I don't have a clean word for. Not grief, exactly. Something more like the awareness that a long chapter is over and the next one doesn't have a shape yet. But I am not angry. I was angry for a while, a cold, flat anger that sat in my chest for most of the summer. That anger kept me very clear-headed and very purposeful, and I am grateful for it, in a way, because it kept me from doing anything reckless. But I have been letting it go, a little at a time, the way you let water drain out slowly, rather than pulling the plug all at once. I was asked recently, by my brother's wife, whether I regretted staying as long as I did, whether I wished I'd seen it sooner, whether the 38 years had been worth it. I thought about it for a while. She let me think. Then I said, I don't regret the 38 years. I raised 2 sons I'm proud of. I built a home that stands solid. I learned what it means to stay. Whether she learned that too is her reckoning, not mine. What I regret is not trusting what I noticed earlier. Not because it would have hurt less, it would have hurt the same, but because I spent months acting like I didn't know something I knew, and that cost me more dignity than it was worth. She made a choice. Then she made another one. Then she made the one at that table in June, in a room full of people I love, and that was the one that told me everything I needed to know about what she thought of me. I didn't yell. I didn't make a speech. I didn't follow up with recriminations or revenge, or a single dramatic act designed to embarrass her the way she had embarrassed me. I put on my coat, I walked out, and I let the door close behind me. There is a kind of dignity in that, I think. It is not the loud kind. It is not the kind anyone outside will necessarily recognize or applaud. But I know what I did, and I know how I did it, and I can live with it, which is more than I can say for some of the alternatives. I am 63 years old. I have a good house, 2 good sons, 4 grandchildren, and a woodworking group on Tuesday nights. I have a decent grill and a front door painted the color I chose myself. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, quite a lot. I did not go back. I am not going back, and that, for now, is enough. People ask me sometimes what I would have done differently. It's a fair question. I've sat with it long enough to give a real answer. I would have trusted what I noticed earlier. Not acted on it recklessly, just trusted it. There's a version of me that saw the cash receipt fall out of that jacket pocket and talked himself out of it inside of 10 minutes. That version of me made a choice to look away, and looking away has a cost. It always does. Not the dramatic kind of cost you see coming. The slow kind. The kind that compounds quietly until one evening you're sitting in a restaurant parking lot with a folder on your lap and nowhere to put what you're feeling. I am not a man who believes the world is keeping score. I don't think the difficult things that happened to me were punishment for something I did wrong, or that my ability to walk out of that room with my head level was some kind of reward. Life is not that tidy. What I do believe is this: the choices we make, repeated over years, build the person we become. My wife made certain choices, small ones at first, then larger ones, and they accumulated into the woman who thought it was acceptable to bring another man into a celebration my son had planned for his wife's hard-earned degree. That didn't happen overnight, and the man I was when I walked out of that room, steady, clear, not cruel, that didn't happen overnight either. 31 years of showing up for the people I loved, of keeping my word when it was inconvenient, of doing the right thing when no one was watching. That is what I had to draw on when I needed it most. That's what I'd want someone to take from this, if they're going to take anything. Not the revenge angle, not the drama of 31 unanswered calls. What I'd want them to see is that character is built in the ordinary moments, not the extraordinary ones. The way you treat people on a Tuesday when nothing is at stake. Whether you follow through on the small things nobody will ever check on. Whether you're the same man alone as you are in public. I tried to be. and when the worst night of my marriage arrived, I had something to stand on. Dignity is not something you manufacture in a crisis. You either have it or you don't, and whether you have it depends entirely on what you've been doing for the last 30 years. I had it. I used it. I walked out quietly, drove to a diner, ate a piece of pie, and let the phone ring. My brother asked me later if I was okay. Not what happened, just, are you okay? That question from someone who meant it was worth more than anything else anyone said to me that year. I want to be that kind of person for the people in my life, the kind who asks the right question and then stays quiet long enough to actually hear the answer. I am 63 years old, and I am starting over in a house I know well, in a life that is smaller in some ways and cleaner in others. I don't know what the next chapter looks like yet, but I know who I am inside it. After everything, that is not nothing. That is the only thing that was ever fully mine to keep,